Now, I don't know about you, but this constant push to reduce speed limits is really getting on my nerves. Cars are safer than they have ever been, so surely we should actually be able to drive faster than we ever have, or at the very least we can have the same speeds. But we have councils, they keep trying to impose a go slow, and the latest is Sydney City Council, which has decided that 50km/h streets across much of its area will be cut to 40 kilometres an hour. And of course they say it's just about making everything safer, particularly for pedestrians. But something tells me it's all an effort to discourage people from using their cars. Joining me now is founder of Car Expert, Paul Marich. Paul, am I right? Is this all just an effort to stop people from using their cars and, I don't know, make them get on bikes instead?
Absolutely, and that is what's happening in Melbourne at the moment. They have put bike lanes everywhere. There is gridlock all around Melbourne. They do not want you driving your car in and around the city, and they portray it as pedestrian safety. But ultimately, when are we actually going to put it onto a pedestrian to watch where they're going? Because there's no risk of getting hit by a car if you're actually watching where you're going.
Well, it's a very fair point. But 40 kilometres an hour, seriously, look, I'm not much of a runner, but I could, well, you know, maybe if I was Usain Bolt, I could run that fast.
That makes two of us.
But you know, at some points you feel like maybe I should just get out of my car and walk. And of course, that's what they want you to do. The reality is that Australia is a car nation because it's a big nation and it has urban sprawl. Now, I'm not sure if it's still the case, but Adelaide used to be, per capita, one of the biggest urban sprawls in the world. We know how big Melbourne and Sydney are in terms of their urban sprawls. People need a car to get around. It's just the reality of life in a country like Australia. And instead of acknowledging that, governments and councils keep putting the speed limit down and punishing you because you dare to live out in the suburbs but work in the city and have to go through these suburbs that are included in somewhere like the city of Sydney.
That's it. And I mean, you look at the cost of living pressures, a lot of people have to travel longer distances to get into the city. And that'll mean catching countless changes on public transport. And people don't even want to be on public transport at the moment. So driving is the only option. And they just make it harder and harder and more expensive to operate a vehicle, to the point where you have no choice but to hand your vehicle in. And this sort of guise of pedestrian safety, ultimately we just need to call it for what it is, and that is having less vehicles in the city. And if that's what it is, just say it that way. We don't need to just keep putting pressure on drivers who already have enough pressure as it is at the moment.
Indeed. So what about the alternative, which of course is cycling? They want you to get on your bike and ride into work. And as you said before, Melbourne's put in all these bike lanes. There's all these bike lanes they have here in Sydney, thanks to the illustrious Lord Mayor Clover Moore, who seems to be impossible to unseat. Is anyone actually using these things?
Well, they're definitely not in Melbourne, and it is so cold out here at the moment. I don't know why any sane person would be riding a bicycle. But you have to think of the logic of a bicycle. A bicycle is fine if you don't really need to be doing anything at the end of your journey. But if you need to be carrying things, if you're buying something, a bicycle is virtually pointless. And to be honest, I don't want to be on a bicycle when there's a distracted driver. And this is the issue they're having with pedestrians. If you have a distracted driver and you get cleaned up on a bicycle, it is going to hurt. It is the last place I'd want to be.
But I'm not sure, and I don't know whether there's data to bear this out, I'm not sure that making people drive slower actually makes the roads any safer. Because, of course, they say that, well, it means if you have a crash, you as the driver will be safer because it'll be lower impact and whatever else. But I would have thought that it would just make drivers more frustrated, which makes them more likely to do silly things that they otherwise wouldn't on the road.
Absolutely correct. And that's the thing, you can reduce the speed limit to the point where you're doing 2 kilometres an hour, then it's safe for everyone. But then no one gets anywhere and you end up with very frustrated drivers. So ultimately you need accountability for drivers to watch what they're doing. You need accountability for pedestrians to watch what they're doing, and then you would have no reason why the two would ever need to interact. But ultimately that is very hard to clamp down on, very hard to educate people on, and they're just taking the easy approach that they also earn money off on speed cameras as well. So it is just a cyclical thing for the government.
Yep, well, look, I think you should be able to drive 130 everywhere and have open speed limits on the highways. But, you know, I'm never going to get that, am I? Paul Marich, thank you so much for your time.